He is the actual seer who worships in the form of transcendental sound representation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, who has no material form. Purport. Our present senses are all made of material elements, and therefore they are imperfect in realizing the transcendental form of Lord Vishnu. He is therefore worshipped by sound representation via the transcendental method of chanting. Anything which is beyond the scope of experience by our imperfect senses, anything which is beyond the scope of experience by our imperfect senses can be realized fully by the sound representation. A person transmitting sound from a far distant place can be factually experienced. If this is materially possible, why not spiritually? This experience is not a vague impersonal experience. It is actually an experience of the transcendental personality of Godhead, who possesses the pure form of eternity, bliss and knowledge. In the Amarkosh Sanskrit dictionary, the word Murti carries import in twofold meanings, namely form and difficulty. Therefore, Amurtikam is explained by Acharya Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur as meaning without difficulty. The transcendental form of eternal bliss and knowledge can be experienced by our original spiritual senses, which can be revived by chanting of the holy mantras or transcendental sound representations. Such sound should be received from the transparent agency of the bona fide spiritual master, and the chanting may be practiced by the direction of the spiritual master. That will gradually lead us nearer to the Lord. This method of worship is recommended in the Pancharatrika system, which is both recognized and authorized. The Pancharatrika system has the most authorized course for transcendental devotional service. Without the help of such course, one cannot approach the Lord. Certainly not by dry philosophical speculation. The Pancharatrika system is both practical and suitable for this age of quarrel. The Pancharatra is more important than the Vedanta for this modern age. Text 39. Translation. O Brahmana, thus by the Supreme Lord Krishna, I was endowed first with the transcendental knowledge of the Lord as inculcated in the confidential parts of the Vedas, then with the spiritual opulences, and then with his intimate loving service. Purport. Communion with the Lord by transmission of the transcendental sound is non-different from the whole Spirit Lord Sri Krishna. It is a completely perfect method for approaching the Lord. By such pure contact with the Lord, without offenses of material conceptions, numbering 10, the devotee can rise above the material plane to understand the inner meaning of the Vedic literatures, including the Lord's existence in the transcendental realm. The Lord reveals his identity gradually to one who has unflinching faith both in the spiritual master and in the Lord. After this, the devotee is endowed with mystic opulences, which are 8 in number, and above all, the devotee is accepted in the confidential entourage of the Lord and is entrusted with specific service of the Lord through the agency of spiritual master. A pure devotee is more interested in serving the Lord than in showing an exhibition of the mystic powers dormant in him. Sri Narada has explained all these from his personal experience, and one can obtain all the facilities which Sri Narada obtained by perfecting the chanting process of the sound representation of the Lord. There is no bar for chanting this transcendental sound by anyone, provided it is received through Narada's representative, coming down by the chain of disciplic succession or the parampara system. Text 40. Translation. Please, therefore, describe the Almighty Lord's activities which you have learned by your vast knowledge of the Vedas, for that will satisfy the hankerings of great learned men and at the same time mitigate the miseries of the masses of common people who are always suffering from material pangs. Indeed, there is no other way to get out of such miseries. Purport. Sri Narayana Muni, from practical experience, definitely asserts that the prime solution of all problems of material work is to broadcast very widely the transcendental glories of the Supreme Lord. There are 4 classes of good men and there are 4 classes of bad men also. The 4 classes of good men acknowledge the authority of the Almighty Lord, and therefore such good men, number 1, when they are in difficulty, number 2, when they are in need of money, 3, when they are advanced in knowledge, 4, when they are inquisitive to know more and more about God, intuitively take shelter of the Lord. As such, Naraji advises Vyasadeva to broadcast the transcendental knowledge of God in terms of the vast Vedic knowledge which he had already attained. As far as the bad men are concerned, they are also 4 in numbers. 1. Those who are simply addicted to the modes of progressive fruitive work and thus are subjected to the accompanying miseries. 2. Those who are simply addicted to vicious work for sense gratification and so suffer the consequences. 3. Those who are materially very much advanced in knowledge but who suffer because they do not have the senses to acknowledge the authority of the Almighty Lord. And 4. The class of men who are known as atheists and who therefore purposely hate the very name of God, although they are always in difficulty. Sri Naraji advised Vyasadeva to describe the glories of the Lord just to do good to all 8 classes of men, both good and bad. Srimad Bhagavatam is therefore not meant for any particular class of men or sect. It is for the sincere soul who actually wants his own welfare and peace of mind. Thus ends the Bhakti Vedanta purport of the first canto, 5th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Narada's Instruction on Srimad Bhagavatam for Vyasadeva. Chapter 6. Conversation between Narada and Vyasadeva. Text 1. Translation. Suta said, O Brahmanas, thus hearing all about Sri Narada's birth and activities, Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God and son of Satyavati, inquired as follows. Purport. Vyasadeva was further inquisitive to know about the perfection of Naraji, and therefore he wanted to know about him more and more. In this chapter, Naraji will describe how he was able to have a brief audience with the Lord while he was absorbed in the transcendental thought of separation from the Lord, and when it was very painful for him. Text 2. Translation. Sri Vyasadeva said, What did you, Narada, do after the departure of the great sages who had instructed you in scientific transcendental knowledge before the beginning of your present birth. Purport. Vyasdeva himself was the disciple of Naraji, and therefore it was natural to be anxious to hear about Narad that after initiation from the spiritual master. He wanted to follow in Narada's footsteps in order to attain to same perfect stage of life. The desire to inquire from the spiritual master is an essential factor to the progressive path. This process is technically known as Sadharma Raksha. Text 3 Translation. O son of Brahmana, how did you pass your life after initiation? And how did you attain this body, having quit your old one in due course? Sri Narada Muni in his previous life was just an ordinary maid servant's son. So, how he became so perfectly transformed into the spiritual body of eternal life, bliss and knowledge is certainly important. Sri Vyasdeva desired him to disclose the facts for everyone's satisfaction. Text 4 Translation. O great sage, time annihilates everything in due course. So, how is it that this subject matter, which happened prior to this day of Brahma, is still fresh in your memory, undisturbed by time? Perfect. As spirit is not annihilated even after the annihilation of the material body, so also spiritual consciousness is not annihilated. Sri Narada developed this spiritual consciousness even when he had his material body in the previous kalpa. Consciousness of the material body means spiritual consciousness expressed through the medium of a material body. This consciousness is inferior, destructible and perverted. But super consciousness of the supramind in the spiritual plane is as good as the spirit soul and is never annihilated. Text 5 Translation. Sri Narada said, the great sages who had imparted scientific knowledge of transcendence to me departed for other places, and I had to pass my life in this way. Purport. In his previous life, when Naradji was impregnated with spiritual knowledge by the grace of the great sages, there was a tangible change in his life. Although he was only a boy of 5 years, that is an important symptom visible after initiation by the bona fide spiritual master. Actual association of devotees brings about a quick change in life for spiritual realization. How it so acted upon the previous life of Sri Narada Muni is described by in this chapter. Chapter 6, text 5, text 6. Translation. I was the only son of my mother, who was not only a simple woman, but a maid servant as well. Since I was her only offspring, she had no other alternative for protection. She bound me with a tie of affection. Text 7. Translation. She wanted to look after my maintenance properly, but because she was not independent, she was not able to do anything for me. The world is under the full control of the Supreme Lord, and therefore everyone is like a wooden doll in the hands of a puppet master. Text 8. Translation. When I was a mere child of 5 years, I lived in a Brahman school. I was dependent on my mother's affection and had no experience of different lands. Text 9. Translation. Once upon a time, My poor mother, when going out one night to milk a cow, was bitten on the leg by a serpent, influenced by the time. Purport. That is a way of dragging a sincere soul nearer to God. The poor boy was being looked after only by his affectionate mother, and yet the mother was taken from the world by the supreme will in order to put him completely at the mercy of the Lord. Text 10. Translation. I took this as the special mercy of the Lord, who always desires benediction for his devotees. And so thinking, I started for the north. Purport. Confidential devotees of the Lord see in every step a benedictory direction of the Lord. What is considered to be an odd or difficult movement in the mundane sense is accepted as a special mercy of the Lord. Mundane prosperity is a kind of material fever, and by the grace of the Lord, the temperature of this material fever is gradually diminished, and spiritual health is obtained step by step. Mundane people misunderstand it. Text 11. Translation. After my departure, I passed through many flourishing metropolis towns, villages, animal farms, mines, agricultural lands, valleys, flower gardens, nursery gardens, and natural forests. Purport. Men's activities in agriculture, mining, farming, industries, gardening, etc. were all on the same scale as they are now, even previous to the present creation, and the same activities will remain as they are, even in the next creation. After many hundreds of millions of years, one creation is started by the law of nature, and the history of the universe repeats itself practically in the same way. The mundane wranglers waste time with archaeological excavation without searching into the vital necessities of life. After getting as impetus in spiritual life, Sri Narada Muni, even though a mere child, did not waste time for a single moment in economic development, although he passed towns and villages, mines and industries. He continually went on to progressive spiritual emancipation. Srimad Bhagavatam is the repetition of the history which happened some hundreds of millions of years ago. As it is said herein, only the most important factors of history are picked up to be recorded in the transcendental literatures. Text 12. Translation. I passed through hills and mountains full of reservoirs of various minerals like gold, silver and copper, and through tracts of land with reservoirs of water filled with beautiful lotus flowers, fit for the denizens of heaven, decorated with bewildered bees and singing birds. Text 13. Translation. I then passed along through many forests of rushes, bamboo, reeds, sharp grass, weeds and caves which were very difficult to go through alone. I visited deep, dark and dangerously fearful forests which were the play yards of snakes, owls and jackals. Purport. It is the duty of a mendicant Parivrajikacharya to experience all varieties of God's creation by traveling alone through all forests, hills, towns, villages, etc. to gain faith in God and strength of mind as well as to enlighten the inhabitants with the message of God. A sannyasi is duty bound to take all these risks without fear, and the most typical sannyasi of the present age is Lord Chaitanya, who travelled in the same manner through the central Indian jungles, enlightening even the tigers, bears, snakes, deer, elephants, and many other jungle animals. In this age of Kali, sannyasa is forbidden for ordinary men. One who changes his dress to make propaganda is a different man from the original ideal sannyasi. One should, however, take the vow to stop social intercourse completely and devote life exclusively to the service of the Lord. The change of dress is only a formality. Lord Chaitanya did not accept the name of a sannyasi, and in this age of Kali, the so-called sannyasis should not change their former names, following in the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya. In this age, devotional service of hearing and repeating the holy glories of the Lord is strongly recommended, and one who takes the vow of renunciation of family life need not imitate the Parivrajikacharya like Narada or Lord Chaitanya, but may sit down at some holy place, and devote his whole time and energy to hear and repeatedly chant the holy scriptures left by the great acharyas like the six Goswamis of Vrindavan. Text 14. Translation. Thus traveling, I felt tired, both bodily and mentally, and I was both thirsty and hungry. So I took a bath in a river lake and also drank water. By contacting water, I got relief from my exhaustion. Purpose. A traveling mendicant can meet the needs of the body, namely thirst and hunger, by the gifts of nature without being a beggar at the doors of the householder. The mendicant therefore does not go to the house of a householder to beg, but to enlighten him spiritually. Text 15. Translation. After that, under the shadow of a banyan tree in an uninhabited forest, I began to meditate upon the super soul situated within, using my intelligence, as I had learned from liberated souls. Purport. One should not meditate according to one's personal whims. One should know perfectly well from the authoritative sources of scriptures through the transparent medium of a bona fide spiritual master, and by proper use of one's trained intelligence for meditating upon the super soul dwelling within every living being. This consciousness is firmly developed by a devotee who has rendered loving service unto the Lord by carrying out the orders of the spiritual masters. Sri Naraji contacted bona fide spiritual masters, served them sincerely, and got enlightenment rightly. Thus, he began to meditate. Text 16. Translation. As soon as I began to meditate upon the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, with my mind transformed in transcendental love, tears rolled down my eyes, and without delay, the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, appeared on the lotus of my heart. Purport. The word bhava is significant here. This bhav stage is attained after one has transcendental affection for the Lord. The first initial stage is called Shraddha, or a liking for the Supreme Lord, and in order to increase that liking, one has to associate with pure devotees of the Lord. The third stage is to practice the prescribed rules and regulations of devotional service. This will dissipate all sorts of misgivings and remove all personal deficiencies that hamper progress in devotional service. When all misgivings and personal deficiencies are removed, there is a standard faith in transcendental matter, and the taste for it increases in greater proportion. This stage leads to attraction, and after this there is bhav, or the prior stage of unalloyed love for God. All the above different stages are but different stages of development of transcendental love. Being so surcharged with transcendental love, there comes a strong feeling of separation which leads to 8 different kinds of ecstasies. Tears from the eyes of a devotee is an automatic reaction, and because Sri Narad Muni in his previous birth attained that stage very quickly after his departure from home, it was quite possible for him to perceive the actual presence of the Lord, which he tangibly experienced by his developed spiritual senses and without material tinge. Text 17 translation. O Vyasdev, at that time, being exceedingly overpowered by feelings of happiness, every part of my body became separately enlivened. Being absorbed in an ocean of ecstasy, I could now see both myself and the Lord. Purport. Spiritual feelings of happiness and intense ecstasies have no mundane comparison. Therefore, it is very difficult to give expression to such feelings. We can just have a glimpse of such ecstasy in the words of Sri Narad Muni. Each and every part of the body or senses has its particular function. After seeing the Lord, all the senses become fully awakened to render service unto the Lord, because in the liberated state the senses are fully efficient in serving the Lord. As such, in that transcendental ecstasy, it is so happened that the senses became separately enlivened to serve the Lord. This being so, Narad Muni lost himself in seeing both himself and the Lord simultaneously. Text 18. Translation. The transcendental form of the Lord, as it is, satisfies the mind's desire and at once erases all mental incongruities. Upon losing that form, I suddenly got up, being perturbed as is usual when one loses that which is desirable. Purport. That the Lord is not formless is experienced by Narad Muni, but his form is completely different from all forms of material experience. For the whole duration of our life, we both see different forms in the material world, but none of them is just apt to satisfy the mind, nor can any one of them banish all perturbance of the mind. There are special features of the transcendental form of the Lord, and one who has once seen that form is not satisfied with anything else. No form in the material world can any longer satisfy the seer. That the Lord is formless or impersonal means that he has nothing like a material form and is not like any material personality. As the spiritual beings having eternal relation with that transcendental form of the Lord, we are life after life searching after that form of the Lord, and we are not satisfied by any other form of material appeasement. Narad Muni got a glimpse of this, but having not seen it again, he became perturbed and stood up all of a sudden to search it out. What we desire life after life was obtained by Narad Muni, and losing sight of him again was certainly a great shock for him. Text 19. Translation. I desired to see again that transcendental form of the Lord, but despite my attempts to concentrate upon the heart with eagerness to view the form again, I could not see him any more, and thus dissatisfied, I was very much aggrieved. Purport. There is no mechanical process to see the form of the Lord. It is completely depends on the causeless mercy of the Lord. We cannot demand the Lord to be present before our vision, just as we cannot demand the sun to rise whenever we like. The sun arises out of his own accord. So the Lord is pleased to be present out of his causeless mercy. One should simply await the opportune moment and go on discharging his prescribed duty in devotional service of the Lord. Narada Muni thought that the Lord could be seen again by the same mechanical process which was successful in the first attempt. But in spite of his utmost endeavor, he could not make the second attempt successful. The Lord is completely independent of all obligations. He can simply be bound bound up by the tie of unalloyed devotion. Nor is he visible or perceivable by our material senses. When he pleases, being satisfied with the sincere attempt of the devotional service, depending completely on the mercy of the Lord, then he may be seen out of his own accord. Text 20. Translation. Seeing my attempts in that lonely place, the personality of Godhead, who is transcendental to all mundane description, spoke to me with gravity and pleasing words just to mitigate my grief. Purport. In the Vedas, it is said that God is beyond the approach of mundane words and intelligence, and yet, by His causeless mercy, one can have suitable senses to hear Him or to speak to Him. This is the Lord's inconceivable energy. One, one, one upon whom His mercy is bestowed can hear Him. The Lord was much pleased with Narada Muni, and therefore the necessary strength was invested in him so that he could hear the Lord. It is not, however, possible for the others to perceive directly the touch of the Lord during the probationary stage of regulative devotional service. It was a special gift for Narada. When he heard the pleasing words of the Lord, the feelings of separation were to some extent mitigated. A devotee in love with God feels always the pangs of separation and is therefore always enwrapped in transcendental ecstasy. Text 21. Translation. O Narada, the Lord spoke. I regret that during this lifetime you will not be able to see me anymore. Those who are incomplete in service and who are not completely freed from all material taints can hardly see me. The personality of Godhead is described in the Bhagavad Gita as the most pure, the supreme, and the absolute truth. There is no trace of a tinge of materiality in his person, and thus one who has the slightest tinge of material affection cannot approach him. The beginning of devotional service starts from the point when one is freed from at least two forms of material modes, namely the modes of passion and the modes of ignorance. The result is exhibited by the signs of being freed from kama lust and lobha covetousness. That is to say, one must be freed from the desires for sense satisfaction and avarice for sense gratification. The balanced mode of nature is goodness, and to be completely freed from all material tinges is to become free from the modes of goodness also. To search the audience of God in a lonely forest is considered to be in the mode of goodness. One can go out into the forest to attain spiritual perfection, but that does not mean that one can see the Lord personally there. One must be completely freed from all material attachment and be situated on the plane of transcendence, which alone will help the devotee get in personal touch with the personality of Godhead. The best method is that one should live at a place where the transcendental form of the Lord is worshipped. The temple of the Lord is a transcendental place, whereas the forest is a materially good habitation. A neophyte devotee is always recommended to worship the deity of the Lord, Archana, rather than go into the forest to search out the Lord. Devotional service begins from the process of Archana, which is better than going out in the forest. In his present life, which is completely freed from all material hankerings, Sri Narad Muni does not go into the forest, although he can turn every place into the Vaikuntha by his presence only. He travels from one planet to another to convert men, gods, kinnaras, gandharvas, rishis, munis, and all others to become devotee of the Lord. By his activity, he has engaged many devotees like Prahlad Maharaj, Dhruv Maharaj, and many others in the transcendental service of the Lord. A pure devotee of the Lord therefore follows in the footsteps of the great devotees like Narad and Prahlad and engages his whole time in glorifying the Lord by the process of kirtana. Such a preaching process is transcendental to the material qualities, to all material qualities. Text 22, translation. O virtuous one, you have only once seen my person, and this is just to increase your desire for me, because the more you hanker for me, the more you will be freed from all material desires. Purport. A living being cannot be vacant of desires. He is not a dead stone. He must be working, thinking, feeling, and willing. But when he thinks, feels, and wills materially, he becomes entangled. And conversely, when he thinks, feels, and wills for the service of the Lord, he becomes gradually freed from all entanglements. The more a person is engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, the more he incurs a hankering for it. That is the transcendental nature of godly service. Material service has satiation, whereas spiritual service of the Lord has neither satiation nor end. One can go on increasing his hankerings for the living transcendental service of the Lord, and yet he will not find his satiation or end. By intense service of the Lord, one can experience the presence of the Lord transcendentally. Therefore, seeing the Lord means being engaged in the service because his service and his person are identical. The sincere devotee should go on with sincere service of the Lord. The Lord will give proper direction as to how and where it has to be done. There was no material desire in Narad, and yet just to increase his intense desire for the Lord, he was so advanced. Text 23, translation. By service of the absolute truth, even for a few days, a devotee attains firm and fixed intelligence in me. Consequently, he goes on to become my associate in the transcendental world after giving up the present deplorable material world. Purport. Serving the absolute truth means rendering service unto the absolute personality of Godhead under the direction of the bona fide spiritual master, who is a transparent wire medium between the Lord and the neophyte devotee. The neophyte devotee has no ability to approach the absolute personality of Godhead by the strength of his present imperfect material senses, and therefore, under the direction of the spiritual master, he is trained in transcendental service of the Lord, and by such training, even for some days, the neophyte devotee gets intelligence in such transcendental service, which leads him ultimately to get free from perpetual inhabitation in the material worlds and to be promoted to the transcendental world to become one of the liberated associates of the Lord in the kingdom of God.
stop now. Stop. Okay. Goodbye. बोलो जोर से थकाने दे हो गया मेरा धीरे पढ़ना होता है कोई तेज पढ़ना होता है
ये लीजिए पानी। आप देखिए क्यों ऑफिस में आने लगा।
Om Vishnu Prabhu. Krishna Krishna.